Land destruction, better known as Ponza, has always been a player in Modern. Classically utilizing cards like Stone Rain, Molten Rain, and Mavoli Acid Moss, these decks often struggle to find a place in the metagame. However, thanks to the relatively recent banning of Arkham's Astrolabe, Red-Green Ponza has been making a comeback and is one of the top decks in the Modern right now. Today, I'll be tackling one of the most recent iterations of this classic archetype that went 4-1 in the recent Modern Preliminary. Although the deck list has changed throughout the years, the whole idea of red-green land destruction has stayed constant. Play a bunch of turn 1 accelerants so that you can basically skip turn 2 and go right to turn 3, where you can play some land destruction spells. On turn 2, you drop something to disrupt the opponent's mana base like a Stone Rain, Molten Rain, or Blood Moon, and then drop a creature that can end the game quickly while the opponent is stumbling on mana. Recently though, the deck has adapted off of the heavy land destruction plan and onto more of just a red-green mid-range plan with a touch of mana disruption in there. So without further ado, let's get on to the deck tech. We only have 8 total sources of ramp in this deck, split up between 2 cards, 4 Arbor Elf and 4 Utopia Sprawl. We use these 2 because we can get 4 mana on turn 2 if we play an Arbor Elf on turn 1. Turn 2, play a forest, enchant a forest with Utopia Sprawl, tap that forest for 2 mana, untap it with the elf, and then tap it again for another 2 mana. This can let us play some very powerful 4 drops on turn 2 that I'll get into later. The second part of this deck is the Mana Denial. While previous iterations of this deck would run 4 Stone Rain, 3 Molten Rain, and 4 Blood Moon, this version actually goes a little bit lighter. We run the 4 Blood Moon because Blood Moon, but the only land destruction we actually run is 3 copies of Pillage. We choose this land destruction spell because having the option to destroy something like an Ensnaring Bridge, Oblivion Stone, or Chalice of the Void game 1 is infinitely more valuable than shocking them if we destroy a shock land. Now that we've discussed the mana ramp and mana denial aspects of this deck, time to find out how to close the game once our opponent is stumbling on mana. 4 of Blood Red Elf is arguably the best card in the deck. Being able to cast a turn 2 Blood Red off of a Utopia Sprawl and Arbor Elf, cascading into something like a Seasoned Pyromancer or Clothis can often just win us the game on the spot, especially if we're on the play. 2 mainboard Scavenging Ooze can become a sizable threat by itself and offer some mainboard graveyard hate if we're up against something like Dredge or Phoenix. Phoenix? Is that still a thing? We have 3 walkers in the deck, 2 Chandra the Torch of Defiance, and 1 Red and 6. A turn 2 Chandra can just win the game for us on its own if we play it on turn 2, and Red and 6 is just some absurd value for only 2 mana. We have 2 5-drops, 2 Glorybringer, and 2 of the new Elder Gargaroth. Being able to cast either one of these on turn 3 after we destroy our opponent's land can be absolutely back-breaking. As for killing our opponent's creatures, we have 4 Lightning Bolt because Lightning Bolt, and 2 Bonecrusher Giant, which can also double as a threat. As for the mana base, it's pretty simple and relatively budget. All you need is 4 Stomping Ground and 8 green fetches. We're running 4 Windswept Teeth and 4 Wooded Foothills because they're cheaper than the Verdant Catacombs and Misty Rainforest, although you can absolutely use those if you own them. Aside from that, we have 6 basic forests because we are a Blood Moon deck, and 2 mountains in case our turn 1 Arbor Elf gets pathed and we need a red source. Before we get on to the sideboard, let's discuss some tips about playing this deck. First of all, if you didn't know, if you have a Utopia Sprawl in a non-basic forest, say Stomping Ground for example, and then you play a Blood Moon, the Utopia Sprawl actually falls off because the Enchant Forest clause is not met once your Stomping Ground turns into a mountain, so if possible, always be sure to put your Utopia Sprawls on basic forests. Another thing you have to work out while playing this deck is whether you should blow up a land on turn 2 or play Blood Moon, or play a threat on turn 2. This is very often dependent on matchup and whether you're on the play or the draw. For example, if you're up against control, you'll often want to be blowing up a land. However, if you're up against burn, you'll often want to be deploying a threat first. If you have both Arbor Elf and Utopia Sprawl in your main hand, finding out which one to play first is often dependent on matchup. But if you're in the blind, always go for the turn 1 Arbor Elf play because that 4 mana on turn 2 is so sweet. However, if you're up against a deck that is most likely to have something like a Lightning Bolt or a Fatal Push, you should play the Utopia Sprawl first because guaranteeing that 3 mana on turn 2 is what this deck relies on. Also, if you're up against Burn, Arbor Elves are basically useless because there's a 99% chance you're gonna get Lightning Bolted, Lava Darted, Gut Shotted, even against Prowess too, so against Burn or Prowess, always play out the Utopia Sprawl first. One final tip, don't keep a hand unless you have some sort of accelerant in that hand. Getting 3 mana on turn 2 is absolutely crucial to this deck doing well, and while a turn 2 Scavenging Ooze is a fine play, it's absolutely nothing compared to what this deck is capable of. Now for the sideboard. We have 2 Grafdigger's Cage and 2 Relic of Progenitus for graveyard decks, 2 Anger of the Gods against any creature decks, 2 Obstinate Baloth against any deck with Liliana of the Veil. You'll also want to bring in that and 1 Weather the Storm against Burn. We have 2 Cindervines for Storm, or really any deck that relies heavily on artifacts or enchantments, 1 Abrade for any creature or artifact-based deck, and finally 3 Boil against Control, Merfolk, or really any blue deck. So, that's about it for today's deck tech. You got any deck that you want me to tech in Modern or anything else? Leave it in the comments below. As always, Twitter, Twitch, and TCG Player affiliate link all in the description down below as well. Thank you so much for watching, and as always, have a great day.